just looking at them, it should be obvious which one is radium and which one is not radium. But this is not, you're still going to have to do your own investigation. And I'm not going to tell you which one is which until we're a little bit deeper into this. Because if you know nothing about it, then you probably don't know which one is just by looking at it. These brands, Girard Perregaux is still an active brand in Switzerland. It's a very old brand, and I think it's an interesting brand. The Doxa is also still an active brand. I was just at this Geneva Watch Days, and they were handing out this magazine, and the Doxa has some advertising in here for their new watches. But Doxa has actually gone through, I think in the 1980s, it went bankrupt and then became dormant, and then somebody repurchased the name. So I think my understanding is that the new Doxa is still owned by Swiss people, and it's still a Swiss-run company, but it's kind of a new incarnation based on the trademark and not so much on the, it's not the old employees or old designers or whatever from the 80s. The other thing is when the quartz crisis happened, Doxa was converged in with some other brands, and that's why this watch says Doxa by Synchron. So I think Synchron was like an assembly of several smaller companies that were struggling at the time, and then eventually Synchron had financial problems as well, and then Doxa went dormant. The dial the crown on this has a Synchron symbol, which is this kind of triangle thing. Okay, so let's take a look, first of all, at the lume itself under the microscope. So one thing that can help you with lume is if and you can't totally rely on this, but usually if there are T's, they stand for tritium. So when you have something that says Swiss at the bottom and has T Swiss T or T's on T Swiss T generally is what it is, and that means it has tritium lume, or it did when it was new. This doesn't have the T, so that means that you have to question if it's older than the era of radium was up until the end of the 1950s, maybe the very early 1960s, but pretty much 50s and earlier, and so if you're unsure if it's 50s or 60s, it's important to check it out. So you can see, I'm just trying to show you some details of and minimize the reflection here. What the lume on this looks like. So you can see there are tiny lume dots on the indices, those tiny, I don't know what you would call it, beige, discolored, off-white, and then there's these lume windows in the hands, and these hands also they have I didn't notice this before, but they have white inlay for contrast above and below the lume. And I would say from looking at this lume has probably not been relumed. It's probably the original lume, just based on, it's pretty neat. It looks like it was applied by a professional. So oftentimes if they've been relumed, it'll look less perfect than that. Not that that looked absolutely perfect. Okay, so then the Gerard Perregaux, just kind of looking at the same thing. It says Swiss made. It doesn't say it doesn't say T for tritium or not. Neither of them do. You can see the kind of color of this lume, and it's very similar in terms of It's just a little bit more brown. And then I think one thing you'll notice is that the style, well, I'm not sure if everybody would notice that, but I would say the style on this, particularly the hands, this is older style. And there's more corrosion on it, but that doesn't, sometimes a very old watch can be in very good condition, and sometimes a newer watch can be in bad condition. So it's hard to tell the date. And also style can be, sometimes newer watches can have an older style, and sometimes older watches can look surprisingly new in terms of their styling. So the next thing about I'm just going to shift to the Doxa for a minute here, because I want to open it up. And I want to also, yeah, well, let's, the Doxa has an ETA movement in it that I'm really fascinated by. Oh, you know, before I forget though, let me look at the prices for these two watches, just so you know. So the Doxa was $35 back in October of 2020. 35 Swiss francs, approximately the same as $35. So that's that. And then the Girard Perregaux was $77 in November of 2020. And I think I bought them both from Swiss Time Arts on Ricardo. And they were both auctions that I won, you know, by bidding against other people. And Swiss Time Arts at the time, it's a seller in Zurich that every week at Sunday evening, every weekend, they would have like 10 or 15 auctions ending, and it's a big dealer, the watch dealer in Zurich that sells very expensive watches, but they always have these kind of vintagey, less expensive watches that they would start with like a no reserve price. So that was like a really fun way to buy watches for me when I was first getting into these. Also realizing that these would be good pieces to work on, you know, to learn watchmaking. So the Doxa in particular is interesting because it has an ETA 2651 movement inside, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. This is on 17joules.info. This is that movement. And it's very, very similar to ETA 2783. And for such a small movement, it's amazing that it has a date function and a second hand. Those are both, you know, complications that take up space and add complexity to the movement. And the date is also a quick set date and a quick date change. And having had some experience with 2783 movement, ETA 2783, and prior movements that I've been working on, I was amazed when I just looked at the pictures of this and saw that it basically looks identical to a 2783, except for the scale of the parts, because like the balance wheel jewel with its shock protection is probably the same size. It looks big here because the whole movement is so small. But the keyless works is under here. The calendar stuff is under here. And if you look at my 2783 videos working on these things, you'll recognize it's basically the same movement, just shrunk down. So that's cool because as a practice watch, it would the smaller the movement is, kind of in my view, the better it is as a practice watch, because it makes it more challenging. So then when you're working on something bigger, it actually is easier instead of more difficult. Now, the other thing about this, though, is it was new old stock. So I'm going to just show you the Timegrapher I've already tested this, and I tested it in a bunch of different positions, and it was constantly, you can see the different positions here. As I move it, you see these glitches in the Timegrapher, but it was in every position, it was like plus 25 to plus 33. So gaining 25 to 30 seconds a day. But the amplitude was strong. It was stronger than that in some positions, and the beat error was almost zero. It was zero almost the whole time. I didn't even see it go to 0.2, but when I froze the screen, it's at 0.2. So I'm going to put the watch on the Timegrapher again right now, and we'll see what it does, if it's the same. And then when we open it, we'll try to regulate a little bit. So the thing about using this as a practice movement is that it's actually, the movement is running so well that right now I would not use it as a practice movement, but you don't know that when you buy something. So again, this was $35. Not that one, this one. Anyway, it was $35. It's running perfectly. It's an amazing little watch. It's a brand that's still alive. I don't have any particular need to go in there and put it at risk to take it apart right now. But if you, but regulation is easier. Like we can just change the regulator a little bit and try to bring the accuracy closer to zero. Okay, so anyway, that's the Timegrapher is telling the same story that it was before. It's basically gaining 30 seconds a day. So the next thing is to get into this a little bit. And that must be for the other one. I happen to have the correct case back opening tool for this. I guess I should give it up at this point that this one is not radium. Yeah, actually, I'm going to, because I don't want to, first of all, people probably are not going to watch this whole video, but also I'll show you how the radium test works. And the reason I'm saying it now is because I would be more careful than I'm going to be, and I will be more careful with the Girard Perregaux because it is radium. So this is a Geiger counter. If a watch has radium in the dial and the hands, it will start counting when you put the watch near it. So you'll see this one when I do it. So that's because it does have radium. So if you're unsure, it's a good idea to purchase a cheap Geiger counter and then test watches before you open them. I'm not using finger cots because I'm not actually going to do anything inside this except for touch it to regulate it a little bit. I guess we can just do the microscope again. I think you can see, yeah, 2651 ETA. You can see that under the balance wheel there. The regulation the regulator I wanted to grab a 2783. I put away the full-size 2783, but you can tell this is a 2472, so you can tell how different those movements are in terms of size. And the other thing I want to look at is let's get some light, see if we get better look if we light this. The regulation thing doesn't say which direction is plus and which direction is minus. And I should know, but I think what we can do is just try one. Actually, let's do this. We got the back off. Just put it in here again. Plus 33. We'll try moving it one way, tiny bit. The reason I'm doing this wrong, you can't see what I'm doing actually. Okay, so now it's already -6. And it's 0. It's exactly 0 now. So I did it the right way, and it's perfect, and that's that. So that's cool. Beautiful little movement. It would be cool to, I wouldn't have been so disappointed if it was not working, because it would give me something to work on. But because it is working, I won't be taking it apart. I'm just going to put some silicone grease on it. On the gasket before I close it up. Gasket would be over here. Oh yeah, we could look at these markings. I think this is interesting that this is kind of typical, like just a Calatrava style case. It's stamped with the brand name, but there's nothing else particularly branded about the case. Doxa, and also it's Synchron that owned the Doxa brand at that time, so the case says Synchron, not Doxa. But basically, the rotor also says Synchron, right? $17 joules. So at that point, the Doxa was just a trademark that had been sold to Synchron when those companies were consolidated. Technically, I probably should use finger cots for this, because the grease is probably kind of pH balanced, neutral, but finger oils are not. But I'm not going to stop and go back now. So we'll just try to close it with a minimal amount of additional touching. Just that little thing of like, that rubber was in very good condition. So this watch is probably from the 70s also. At the end of that period, I believe it was sometime in the early 80s when Synchron finally went bankrupt or dissolved or whatever also. So this watch is 70s or 80s. So now it's plus 6 seconds, 1 millisecond beat error. Now it's minus 1 second, 0.3 millisecond beat error. So that's good. That's a fairly well regulated watch. So now with the Girard Perregaux, since we know that it's radium, let's look at this again. There's some corrosion on the hands that I think is also a sign, like any kind of the radium is nasty stuff. It has a half-life of 1,600 years. So in 1,600 years, it loses half of its radioactivity. And in 3,200, it loses another half. So radium stays radioactive for a very long time. The other thing about a difference is, and my belief is that this is tritium, the Doxa, because of when it was made and when it would have been lumed, even though it doesn't say T on the dial. And tritium, you can be somewhat certain that something is tritium if you charge it with a flashlight and then look at it in the dark. If the lume fades very quickly, like if the lume lights up, but it fades quickly, that's usually, in my experience, that's old tritium. And even though tritium has like a nuclear or radioactive sounding name, I think it's not nearly as dangerous. That's why they switched to it. It may be slightly dangerous, like you don't want to eat a bar of tritium, but but it's much less dangerous than radium was, and that's why they switched to it. And it has a slower, a faster radioactive decay of 12 years or something like that, half-life, maybe even less. So that's why tritium loses its luminous ability. And if you charge the luminous material with a flashlight and it doesn't have the tritium radiation helping it remain luminous, it'll fade very quickly. So that was, I experienced that with this when I was testing it as well, the fast fade out. Okay, so the thing about radium is that it can often lead to some discoloration or some other faults because that radiation has been sitting there, in this case for 60 years, inside the case, affecting the materials around it. So I think I'm not even going to open this. I think it's there's no reason to open it. I'm actually going to make sure the back is tight. I was just testing this tool before I started the video and made sure that the tool was the right size, but I'm going to make sure it's tight again. The other thing is, this is a tiny watch, but radium gives off radon gas. So if you have a big watch with a lot of radium and you open it up in front of your face and you're locked in your bathroom or some small space, that radon gas could come out, and that's also not great. But yeah, so that's those. And then I wanted to just, because I did a video about Eterna that I posted a couple days ago. And at the end, I showed this box of Eterna watches that I have. And I wanted to take a quick look at this, because when I was looking at these watches, I noticed that this one I paid, I think, $7 for. $9. Four to ship it. $9. The purchase price was $9. So again, the reason that that's interesting, this is a simpler movement. Eterna movements are tied to the evolution of ETA movements. But this is a beautiful little gold-plated, ladies' watch, simple Eterna buckle. And so I just want to pop this open because this is the kind of bargain watch that, oh no, I actually wanted to try this on the Timegrapher first. So the $9 ladies watch, Eterna, tied into the evolution of ETA, is probably also a very good watch to learn on. And the amplitude's a little bit low on this one. It's still the beat error is very low. Amplitude low is bad, beat error low is good. And it can be regulated to be, this watch is also in such good condition it doesn't need to be serviced. But for $9, that's like a good practice watch. And this is an automatic movement. It's just simpler. It doesn't have a seconds hand. And I noticed when I was looking at it before that it has, I don't like snapbacks, but you can see the divot right here. So we'll see if we can get that back off without too much fuss. And that's just to look at the movement and make a note as to if we can see what movement it is. I think I see something under the balance wheel there. Not sure though. Get the microscope going on that. But while we have the Timegrapher in the shot, I just want to take a look at this on the Timegrapher also. Now that's hilarious. I don't know if that's even... Let's see, is that keeping... It's keeping time right now. I don't believe this. I think it's misinterpreting the beat rate. See, it's having trouble with the beat rate. And if it gets the beat rate wrong, it's going to get everything else wrong. Anyway, the irony of that, of course, is that this is a Radium watch. It's older. It's not surprising that it's not running as well. It's not clear if it's really this bad or not. I can let it run overnight and see if it loses 600 seconds or 10 minutes. But the The irony is it's radium watch, so you have to be much more careful about it. So it's not a great practice watch. And it's also pretty ironic to me that these watches that are 60 years old are running perfectly and don't need service. Which is cool. If you're just collecting and you don't want to learn watchmaking, it's cool that you can find watches in really great condition. So what we want to look at here is just if we can see, there is a number there. $1445 46. Oh man, I forgot to hit record on this. Ugh, that sucks. 1446. Man, so all the other microscope stuff. I might have to reopen that watch. There's a nice blued screw on that. 1446. I'm like, I better write that down. I have 8 cameras recording, and I'm like, I gotta write it down. I'll put. I want to have make a note of that, and then look up this movement also. There's the Eterna logo on the crown. The 5-ball bearings. All the usual suspects. This looks like it could use some cleaning, and I'm just not going to mess around with that right now. I want to. That was really just to say. There's so much to be done in terms of going through these. First of all, I have access to infinite number of old vintage watches here in Switzerland, which is exciting. And my intention is just to continue to learn more and find watches that are not in such perfect condition, so there's something that I can do to them. I think what I'll do about the microscope not working is after I finish the video, I'll go back and try to shoot some shots just to fill in what was missing in the earlier part, and then you can notice if it was faked or not. But I have some notes here. Doxa, yeah, that's it. This video is still 40 minutes long, and but the point of this mainly was be careful about radium, and there's still a lot of mechanical watches that I want to open up and explore. All right, thanks a lot if you watched any part of this. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next one.